taped it beside their picture in the newspaper so you could see what they look like then versus now. So I'd like to start here. So I had the honor of serving in the House in 2002 to 2006, so I know what you folks go through. It's a lot, so thank you for your service in the legislature. I've been a circuit judge since 2017, and before that I had a law practice where I dealt a lot with, I was a prosecutor and also a criminal defense attorney, so I saw both sides of it, and I saw how addiction affects the community for many years. What I would like to do today, just talk for a few minutes, and I'll try to keep my remarks to 10 or 15 minutes, and then Prosecutor Hammer will speak a little, and then we'll entertain any questions you guys like. And if you have any questions as I'm speaking, feel free to jump in as well. But I'd like to talk just for a minute about the history of drug court, how you get into drug court, what drug court is all about, and just go over some of that just so you have an understanding. Because I know the main focus, I believe, is trying to get the prison and jail population down. I know we have a real issue with that, retaining staff, retaining COs. And so this is one tool that I think you have in your toolbox to use to try to get people out of incarceration and into the court system in a different avenue so you can reduce the number of people who are actually incarcerated. So drug courts started really in this country back in the 90s. And the first one that came to West Virginia was here in Cabot County. I came here as an assistant prosecutor in 1999, fresh out of law school. The Supreme Court was just seeing at that time what was happening with drug courts down in Florida. They were just starting to make some national news. And so they sent me and one of the judges here locally and some other people down to Florida. And we spent a week down there learning how to run a drug court. We came up here and started the first juvenile drug court in the state. That was a juvenile drug court. Since then, they've blossomed out all over the state. We have juvenile drug courts all over the state and then adult drug courts. I'm currently running the adult drug court here in Cabot County and have been since 2017. So what is drug court? It's an intense supervision program. This is not probation. This is not the population of people who come into the criminal justice system with a felony and we're going to just put them on probation, and this is just another avenue of probation. Make no mistake about it, these are people who would be headed to prison. We get, as judges, we get what's called a PSI, a pre-sentence investigation from our probation department, and at the end of it, it gives a recommendation. And it either says, put this person in prison, put this person on probation, put this person on home confinement. These are people who are headed to prison, and by agreement of the prosecutor, myself, the defense attorney, and the rest of our team, we decided to basically pull that person from a track headed to prison and put them into drug court. So how does a person get into drug court? As you all know, there are some restrictions. You can't be a violent offender. You can't be a violent felon. But if you have a substance abuse problem, you're not violent, it seems to me that the best course of action, rather than housing these people in a jail cell for a year or two and then letting them back out where they're going to go right back to substance abuse, is to seriously work on the root cause of the problem. Try to rehabilitate them, get them back out into society. I think as most of you have seen that picture now, you'll notice, especially the girl on the bottom. I mean, she was, any one of you, and I see them every day when I'm walking into the courthouse, I can spot a person from 100 yards away and say, that person's on heroin. That is clearly a heroin addict on the bottom right-hand corner of that page. And what you see on the other side of her picture is her today. She's getting her kids back. Her name is Nina. She works in the Huntington Mall. I see her every time I walk in the mall. She's got a job there. Always a big smile on her face. She's in a healthy relationship. She's a completely different person. Now, what if we had taken Nina a year ago, just sent her to prison, like we would have done if there hadn't been a drug court? She would be getting back out of jail about now, out of prison. We would have spent a lot of money on her, housing her, and guess what the first thing she would have done was go right back out on the streets and gone right back to the heroin needle. So drug court is, I can't emphasize enough how powerful it is and how effective it is. I think it's really our most important tool in combating addiction. Personally, that's the way I feel about it. Maybe I'm a little biased because I run a drug court, but I've been in this system now for 25 years, and I've seen what works and what doesn't, so I can tell you firsthand that, and that's photo evidence of what 1 year in a drug court can do. And while I'm talking about her, now, what happened, well, and I'll explain this as I go through the stages here in just a second, but what happens to her now, she's just graduated the 1 year program, she moves into aftercare, which is like a phase 4. So for the next 6 months, we don't just turn her loose, we continue to supervise her, we continue to drug screen her. She still has check-ins with our probation department, but she's a totally different person. And so are the other people in that picture and a number of other people who have successfully graduated our program. And I like to say, those are some examples of some spectacular success stories, but I would be lying if I said everybody that comes into drug court is a spectacular success story, because almost for every person who is a spectacular success story, we have a spectacular failure. Some people just can't put it down, no matter how much supervision we give them, how much intense therapy we do. Some people still end up eventually failing out of drug court and having to do time. But we have over a 50% success rate nationwide. From my understanding, I go to an annual training every year and hosted somewhere in the country, different cities. I go to that, try to get there every year. And what I can tell, our success rate runs higher than the national average by several percentage points, which I think is kind of a big deal considering how bad addiction is in our community and in the state. So just so you understand the structure of drug court, how it's different from probation, it's designed to be, if you are a successful, dedicated participant, it's designed to be a 52-week program. You come in, there's 3 phases, and then you go into 6 months of aftercare. So if you are a model drug court citizen, you can do this program in 1 year and then go into 6 months of aftercare. So how is that 1 year broken down? It's broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is intense supervision. So every Monday afternoon on my calendar for the rest of my term, my Monday afternoons are completely blocked off. I go into staffing at 1 p.m. and we spend an hour talking about, with the prosecutor, with our probation officers, we talk about every single person individually and how they did that week, their pros, their cons. I get a cheat sheet that tells me how they're doing. We talk about all their cases individually, and then after an hour of staffing those people, we bring all the participants into the courtroom, and then I bring them up one at a time, and I have just a casual conversation with every participant. It's not on the record. It's not normal court. I basically take off that hat of being the judge that's sending people to jail and prison all the time, and I'm more in like a second chance kind of mode. And if you ever go on YouTube and watch any videos of drug court judges interacting with defendants, you'll see it's a completely different exchange than I was just doing 30 minutes ago when I was on the bench here in criminal cases. So it's almost like a close-knit family. It's kind of the relationship that's formed with these people. They have to see me every single week in phase 1. So it's intense. They come in every week, so they know they're accountable. They see their probation officer multiple times per week. Just to give you an example, and this is something I know as a legislator you're more interested in, your probation officers who, you're providing the funding to the court and the court's delegating this out, your normal probation officer that handles normal criminal defendants can see or can have on their caseload 60 people. They can supervise 60 defendants. If you're a drug court probation officer, you are capped at 20 defendants. So you can only have 20. That's how much more intense it is, because you're constantly going out in the community and visiting these people in their sober living houses, at their recovery points, and all those places that take care of them. You're doing a lot of intense supervision. So funding for those probation officers is very important. I was just doing some quick math last night looking at that and thinking, if you just average on a jail bill $50 a day per person. I know that's not exact, it fluctuates, but if you just took an average of $50 a day, 20 people on a drug court probationer's load, that's $1,000 a day that probation officer is saving you in jail costs by not having those people in prison. So that's almost $400,000 a year savings per probation officer. And it's keeping those 20 people out of the prison system, which is making the workload better for the COs and so forth. So for every probation officer, those are the approximate numbers I think that you can kind of think about. What else are those people doing while they're in drug court? They're going through intense personal therapy, individual therapy, intense group therapy. They have multiple. They're not allowed to work, and most of them are not in their own housing at this point either. They're in facilities around the town. We're lucky here in Cabell County, fortunate, I guess, to some degree, because we have so many resources that a lot of the more rural counties don't have. So I accept, and our team accepts, a lot of transfers from other counties that don't have all the resources, because we have so many places that we can put these folks when they're here in Huntington. So that is beneficial. So after 16, 17 weeks, if they've been successful, we move them to phase 2. Phase 2, they only have to come and see me every 2 weeks. We're starting to let the rope out a little bit, and they start to reduce a little bit of therapy. They start to reduce a little bit of intense supervision, but it's still pretty strong on them. It's way more than a normal probationer. And then by the time they get to in phase 2, we're also making them work. We don't let nobody gets a free pass. Nobody gets to be lazy in this program. This is not like some other forms of supervision where we don't really push work that much. I'm very strong on the work ethic on these folks. I make them get a job, but don't accept their excuses for having a hard time finding employment. If they don't get employment, they're not moving on to another phase. And for that reason, we also have some other restrictions that we don't do in normal court. Like, I don't let them get tattoos while they're in drug court. And that started a while back when somebody in my drug court got a face tattoo in the middle of drug court. They came in with a face tattoo. And I was like, you just set a new policy now. Nobody's allowed to get tattoos until you're out of this program. Because we're working to get these people back into society, being productive, making something of themselves. And it's kind of hard to get out there and get a job when you've got some graphic right in the middle of your face. So we tell them, you can go and get those tattoos after you graduate, but we're going to wait until you get out of our program first, because we do want you doing that. We also make them, we make them give a 2-week notice. If they're going to quit a job, they have to put in a 2-week notice, because I tell them, we have several employers here in town that are really have a good relationship with our drug court. And if you just walk out the door and quit on them, you're hurting all the rest of the family here. You're hurting our drug court. So you got to put in a 2-week notice. You have to be a responsible employee. By the time they get to phase 3, then they only have to see me once every 3 weeks. And they start to really reduce some of the other things. At that point, we're in full integration mode, getting them back into the community. We're trying to reunite them with their kids. Most of them have lost their kids, as you can imagine, through some sort of abuse and neglect proceeding, or a lot of times it's just grandparents raising their kids. So we're working on reuniting the family. You'll notice in that paper we passed around also, I think there's a picture of a little girl that came up and won, a little 3-year-old. So a lot of these kids are separated from their parents, obviously, when they're in addiction. By the time we have a graduation, there are many times we have little kids that are just running around with parents, and happy and proud. And a lot of tears are shed during those. And a lot of times the parents of these folks show up, and they're very thankful for what we've been able to accomplish with their children. And then, like I said, the aftercare goes on for 6 months while we continue to supervise them in the program. So what's the point of drug court? I think just in a very brief nutshell, there's 2 main points. One, that I think the rest of our team are most passionate about, we are actually saving lives. I don't think that's a cliche statement. I think it is truth, and I think it can be borne out by the numbers in our program and what we're doing with the criminal justice population. I think it's the most important thing I do as a judge. And I have about somewhere between 600 and 800 cases at any given point during the year. At any time, that's about our number. And these people that I have in drug court are the most important thing I do. We have the biggest drug court in the state. We had almost 60 people in our population before COVID. COVID slowed everything down, as everybody knows. Right now, we're in the low 30s, but we're still the biggest drug court in the state. And my goal is to get us back up to that, closer to that 60 number. Right now, we're down one probation officer, so we have 2 POs, and we're running in the low 30s. But yesterday, we just accepted 3 more people in the drug court. That would be 3 people that were heading to prison if we hadn't taken them in. And also, secondly, the other point is it is a cost savings. I mean, when you set aside the personal side of it, the stories of all these people that you can read about and see, and the lives we're changing, the bottom line is it's a monetary savings for the state. So I think that's kind of a big deal. Let's see. So I was also just looking at some rough numbers. So when we were running at full capacity with 3 POs and pushing 60 people in drug court, we were, by my numbers, saving the state over 1.1 million, which I know is a small amount, but I'm just one judge, so you multiply that all around the state. And we were keeping almost 60 people out of prison, which is the number of people that a number less that the CEOs and the management of the jail systems have to deal with. And I'll end my remarks on this thought. We also, I know that's just 3 people from yesterday that you can see proof of, but we have one of the people on our team, her name is Robin. She would have been here today, she just had a baby. She was in terrible throes of addiction. I had to put her in jail several times while she was in drug court. She is probably our biggest success story. She now works at our Naval Court Center here in Huntington. She was so excited the day she got that job, and she came to drug court and said, "This is so crazy. I actually have an office, like an office for these folks." It's just something she never dreamed she would ever achieve in life. She's in a healthy relationship, has a full-time job, has a child now, looks like a completely different person. And the insight that somebody like a Robin can give to people like me and the prosecutor is beyond measure. When these people come up and sometimes they're feeding me a line that I might fall for, she can spot it a mile away because she's been out there in the madness, as they say. So having her insight in these things is great. And one other guy, the last one I'll share, named Eddie Wiggins, great guy we had in drug court, recently graduated from our drug court, came in, he was a mess in the program. He eventually graduated. He got his CDL at the end of drug court, and he stopped in and visited us the other day, and I think he's making close to $80,000 a year driving a truck. He's got a brand new newborn himself and a good relationship, so complete life change for him too. So thank you all for the time to present here. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on what drug court is like and how it can benefit. And if you want questions at the end, is that the best way to go?
We'll probably do it now. But Judge, thank you for your presentation, but more importantly, thank you for the work that you do with drug courts and saving the lives of folks in the program. I do want to open it up to questions of members, the committee members at this time. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Judge Howard, for being here. First of all, what is the criteria for being eligible for drug court?
It's a good question. And so you have to be convicted of a felony, and it cannot. So a lot of times there are misdemeanors down in magistrate court that people have said, "Oh, this would be a great candidate," but they're just not eligible. They have to have a felony. They have to have pled guilty to a felony. Now, sometimes we do a deferred adjudication where they plead guilty to the felony, but I don't actually accept their plea until the end of drug court, because if they're successful, then we'll dismiss the felony and let them plead to a misdemeanor and they can get on with their lives. If they fail out, then I'll accept the felony and then they're convicted felon. But they have to have a felony that they've pled to, and it cannot be a violent offense. It cannot be an offense with a firearm. So if they've robbed somebody or they've maliciously wounded somebody and been convicted of it, they're not eligible for drug court.
When you have individuals, say, that are charged with possession with the intent to deliver, I believe is the term, do those people become eligible also for drug court?
Yes, sir. We do have a lot of those people in drug court. Now, if they are, now when you hear that term, possession with intent to deliver, you may be thinking this is a hardcore drug dealer from out of state. That's not the type of person we're looking for. There are a lot of people who are convicted who are just local folks who are caught up in robbing, and not robbing, but stealing, burglarizing property just to support their drug habit. They get caught with an amount of dope on them that is enough to be considered for distribution. So they'll get charged with a heavier amount. In reality, a lot of those people are probably just using it. They may be very low-level distributors, but we don't want some kingpin from out of state in our drug court, because that would just be a bad apple that would corrupt. They go through a pretty intense, it takes about 2 weeks for our staff to evaluate the person. We dig all the way back into their childhood. And of course, I'm biased, but I'm very big on the POs here in our county. I think we have great POs. They do amazing work, great investigations. I'm sure they're, actually, I should also, I don't know if any of you are here from Beckley, but we did a graduation yesterday, and Jared McGuffin, the man pictured there who graduated, he was supervised originally by a PO in Beckley. They transferred him to us because we have more resources here. And that PO in Beckley drove up here yesterday just to speak to his graduation and say how proud he was of it. So, you know, sometimes I don't think all of our state employees get the kudos they should, but he didn't have to do that. Meant a lot to that drug corps graduate. So things like that are neat. But yeah, we take as many as we possibly can.
One other question is, once these people have completed their treatment drug court, is their record expunged, or does it still stay on their record?
It depends. Every case is different. Some people, the way I prefer to bring them in is through a deferred adjudication, the way I just mentioned a minute ago, where I don't actually accept the felony plea, especially if it's their first offense. So they're not a convicted felon sitting in drug court. And if they're successful, then we can get rid of that felony and they can get on with their lives. If they are a convicted felon, there is a process that they can go through under statutes that you all have actually been more liberal with in recent years in expanding the expungements, which I think is beneficial to a lot of people. So there are people who can go in and have certain crimes expunged.
Thank you for your effort in this. And it's very important even beyond the savings that it creates for the state, the lives that you change.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Go ahead, Hot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Judge, for being here. I've had the privilege of attending some drug court graduations. I'll tell you, it's powerful. It's a very emotional experience. To say that it was an intense process would be an understatement, I think. To your knowledge, how many active drug courts are in West Virginia currently?
Well, don't hold me to this number, but I think it's approximately at 30 or in the low 30s. And of course, so 55 counties, there are a number of those counties that are in the same circuit. So every county doesn't have its own drug court, but I think just about every circuit does. Now, some of the circuits don't have real high numbers. I mean, I've talked to some judges at conference, and they may only have 3 or 4 people in their drug court. I think even Kanawha County, the biggest county in the state, is in the teens with their numbers right now. But those numbers fluctuate. But I think we're somewhere in the low 30s of total drug courts. And then, of course, the legislature has also expanded treatment courts now, which is trying to bring the whole family in, almost like an abuse and neglect drug court. then there, of course, there are juvenile drug courts, so there are different versions, but I'm just speaking to the adult.
Would it be accurate to say that it takes a judge willing to have a lot of volunteerism and spirit of within and belief in the program, because this is something that you're choosing to do? Is that accurate?
That is accurate. I don't ever bring that up personally when I'm talking about it, but if I'm asked about it, I will say yes. It's basically a volunteer job. So
that was my shock in trying to learn more about this, was that why isn't this happening everywhere? Why isn't it abundant? Because the success stories, talking about lives here, but beyond the lives, which is the most important thing, you look at the savings, it's millions and millions of dollars. We're having babies that are being born that are not drug-free, that the graduates got up there and said, you know, wasn't for this drug court, this is exactly what would have happened. We keep talking a lot about recidivism and how that rate is, and the drug court in comparison is hugely successful as to what else is going on in our court system. So if you're not willing to say that, I respect that. I want to let the members know and understand that. I know Judge Charlie Carl, who's from my area that you maybe have worked with before, has a lot of passion for this program. And I asked him that question. He said, it's going to be dependent on a judge who has a heart for this. They're going to have to be willing to give a lot of their time and talent. So I applaud you for that.
Judge Carl is a great judge, and that's 100% accurate. No drug court judge in the state is getting paid $1 more to do it. And you're increasing your caseload by, let's say I'm increasing my caseload by 40 cases, and I'm taking those cases from other judges in the county, so they're decreasing their load, and I'm increasing mine. So, and that applies to any judge in the state who's actually running a drug court. So it's a volunteer effort that you really have to be passionate about to do it. So.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After they complete the aftercare program, do you have a problem with some of them relapsing because they're not responsible to check in with anybody?
It does happen. Unfortunately, sometimes we'll find out several years later that somebody has relapsed, and oftentimes when they do, they overdose and die because they go back to using an amount that they were used to using prior, and their system isn't used to it. That does happen. There's not a great tracking mechanism for us to know how many people that happens with, because once they're off of paper, so to speak, we can't really track them. So just anecdotally, I think our success rate is really good, because I still see a lot of these folks around the community, but we do from time to time have somebody that relapses and then they come back in. What we encourage them to do at the end of aftercare is to stay connected. Those are the words I'm sure you've heard. Those are the words in recovery that are most important to these folks. Stay connected. And they'll all tell you, if they're going to NA or AA meetings and they're staying connected with their family of people who have been in addiction, they will do way better than people who just disassociate, and then the stressors of life reignite those old triggers, and they're back into their habits. Thank you.
Bill Garcia.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Judge Howard. One question I would have is, what can the legislature do? What type of support do you think would be helpful to make what you do more successful, help make it where we can provide to more people maybe this opportunity to do other things throughout the state?
That's a great question. I think the probation officers are the key to really the program. I mean, the judge is there, whether I'm doing 20 people or whether I have 40 or 60, I'm there for the same cost, so to speak, for the state. Your POs, though, can only have a max of 20 per PO. So the more POs that you can make sure are funded, and I know that's also a question for the Supreme Court, but the more POs that we have who can operate these drug courts, have the training they need, every PO is a cost savings to the state when you look at these numbers. So they can be saving $1,000 a day keeping people out of prison. So that's important, I think. And also the network. What we hear from, what I hear personally, and you all probably hear too, any of you represent more rural counties, is a lot of them don't have the funding they need for maybe their day report centers or their other services that could support a recovery community and support their drug court. So they have to, a lot of them are sending their people to us here in Huntington. And I have we get a lot of transfers because we have so many resources from that. Everybody remember that 2016 heroin Netflix thing that came out when we had all those overdoses here. Our recovery community exploded here, so we have a lot of resources. So Huntington's pretty good, but there are a lot of other places around the state that really could use more support services for their drug courts. A lot of that, I think, is DRCs and other things like that.
Thank you. Thank you. So when somebody comes here from another county, there's no money that falls to them, right? You just take it in county. Correct. You said your recidivism was about 50%. Your success rate, let's say your success rate.
Our success rate, I would say, is somewhere between 55 and 60%.
That's incredible, Judge. That's incredible. I want to thank you for what you do. I've been, our mind's been changed in the last 5 years. My background was law enforcement, so I thought everybody ought to do all that. But all of a sudden, I began to realize that there are people who need our help. So whatever we can do to help, please let us know. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Any further questions? Judge Howard, thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much. Thank you.
At this time, we'll have a presentation regarding home incarceration day report centers as an alternative to custodial incarceration. Sean Hammers joins us, prosecuting attorney from Cabell. Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Been asked to talk about home confinement and day report centers. So just starting out, I'm in my 30th year of practicing law, 27th year as a prosecutor. So I remember before the regional jails were county jails and people were sleeping on top of each other. That's the problem. And the problem now is the cost of the regional jails. So, and I want to thank Judge Howard. He does a great job in drug court. That's probably the most rewarding thing I do as a prosecutor is being in drug court. So where do we start when we talk about home incarceration and day report centers? We look at how many cases we have, how many people are in jail. So last year in Cabell County, we had 828 felony arrestees. We had 5,703 misdemeanor arrestees. So we have to look at alternatives. And what are our alternatives? When you look at pre-conviction, where bond can't be made, our options are probation under bond supervision and home confinement and day report centers. And pre-conviction, we look at day report centers under what we call the pretrial bond committee. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then our alternatives post-conviction are probation, with or without drug court, and home confinement and day report centers. So, as a prosecutor, one thing that I lie awake at night is you have to be mindful of protecting the public, because 99% of the people who are on day report and on home confinement, they're not on those alternatives sentencings unless my office agrees to it. So one mess up and the egg's on my face. So I want to talk about home confinement. And we have a great home confinement office. So Cabell County, our home confinement office is comprised of 10 full-time officers and 2 part-time officers. And we have administrative assistants that go with that. All these officers are certified through the West Virginia State Police Academy or the West Virginia Corrections Academy. And they also maintain a minimum of 32 hours of in-service training annually. And our office, I think, well, I'm almost positive, unlike any other home confinement office in the state, is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's always somebody watching the screen. If anybody escapes, or they leave their exclusion, or they go into an exclusion zone, or leave their residence, we know about it. So now, all people on home confinement, of course, they have to be pre-approved. And so we look at their criminal history. If they're violent, criminal history. If they have a lot of criminal violence, we don't take them. If they have a warrant, also under the Home Confinement Act, if they have a warrant for them out of another jurisdiction, they can't get home confinement in Cabell County. Our home confinement office supervises between 125 and 150 people. And their charges can range from anywhere from shoplifting. We've had people pre-trial, pre-conviction defendants on home. Who are on home confinement in a recovery facility, recovery point, whatever. A lot of people, they can monitor them there as well. So they use sanctions to help inmates gain compliance on home confinement. In 2022, they did have 10 inmates, which isn't bad. 10 inmates cut their ankle bracelet and leave. Of course, they're charged with felony escape, and they're brought back in and they're prosecuted for the escape charge as well as the charge which they were on. The home confinement office, in a sense, is self-sustaining. So the fees they pay for their cars, their fuel, and their equipment. The only thing the county pays for is salaries. And in addition to monitoring the inmates that are on home confinement, the inmates do a lot of community service. So a lot of these people picking up litter on the interstates and highways, they very well could be home confinement inmates. So, and a lot of times you think a lot of these people are unemployed that are on home confinement. A lot of times we have family members that help pay the fees, but the fees do get paid. It's kind of hard to believe that the fees do get paid, and they are not released from home confinement if they owe any money. So it's a very successful program in Cabell County, largely because of our officers and because of the sheriff, because of the director of home confinement. They do an excellent job. And really, when I agree to put somebody on home confinement, even though I worry about what may happen, I have a good feeling about it because of the way our home confinement office operates. And so another alternative that I use in the prosecutor's office is the Day Report Center. So the Day Report Center serves Cabell and Wayne County. And so they have a dual purpose of imposing sanctions and providing services to offenders. A lot of people on Day Report more are misdemeanors because they can help that person get back into the community for all the services they provide. They serve like direct sentences out of magistrate and circuit court. Bond probation uses them. Of course, adult drug court uses the Day Report Center. They service parole. A lot of people on home confinement even go to the Day Report Center for the services that they provide. I was surprised to learn that family court refers a lot of people to Day Report Center because they do drug testing. And they even service DHHR and CPS. So what are the services that they provide? Obviously, I talked about drug screens, and those are paid for by the defendant. Or drug court pays for drug screens, and even parole pays for some of those drug screens. We have, they have, let me see, I think they have 9 full-time employees and 5 part-time employees, and a lot of the part-time employees are therapists. So they offer individual therapy for the defendants, group therapy, and aftercare groups support. They have group sessions available for all ERC clients. And you'd be surprised, there's a lot of people that need anger management. I know that's hard to believe, but they provide anger management, relapse prevention, and they service a lot of co-occurring disorders. So a lot of people who are in there do have addiction problems, but they also have something else that goes with it. It's either bipolar disorder or PTSD. So they got a lot of issues going on, and our Day Report Center can address those issues. We have a peer recovery support specialist on staff, and case management services. That's a big thing. People come into Day Report system, they don't know what's going on, and they help identify the deficiencies in a person. And of course, they also do community service. So in a nutshell, mainly we have home confinement, which is basically these people need to be monitored. They should otherwise be in jail. I remember when our first home confinement office opened. I was a young prosecutor, and I thought, this is a terrible idea, because I too thought that everybody needed to go to jail. But I've changed my mind. When Day Report Centers came up, I said, well, what are we doing? We're coddling, but changed my mind. When I first took over as prosecutor, I was appointed as the elected prosecutor in 2014, and my predecessor told me, he said, you need to be involved in drug court. And I said, I'm not a fan. Now, I'm a huge fan. It's the way to go. It works. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 27 years. The drug court program works. And in Cabell County, our Day Report Center works. It helps people get back out in the community and not go back to the same old thing they've done. They don't, it used to be you see the same old people get rearrested. Day Report Center helps alleviate that perception in the community. And as you know, when you go and talk to the voters, they're not a fan. A typical citizen is not a fan of somebody who's committed a crime being on home confinement for Day Report. But having done this as a prosecutor, I'm telling you, we need to continue to go down the path. We need to continue to use home confinement. We need to continue to use Day Report Centers. And we definitely need to continue to be plugged into the adult drug court. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of our presenter, Senator?
People that are put on home confinement, if they were gainfully employed, are they allowed to continue to work?
That's a very good question, and I probably should have addressed that. When somebody's put on home confinement, they are allowed to work. They are allowed 1 day a week to go get like groceries, and they're allowed to attend church 1 time a week, and doctor's appointments, obviously.
You can monitor where they are just about any time.
Yes, in Cabell County. Now, of course, that's because the sheriff, our sheriff is really plugged into home incarceration, and we have the best equipment. Like I said, they can tell you which side of the couch they're sitting on in their house. Also, the important part of that is, let's say there's a victim in a crime that was committed by somebody who's on home confinement, there would be an exclusion zone around the victim's house, around their neighborhood, where if they go close to that victim's house, the alarm goes off. And a home confinement officer is out to pick up the inmate and put him in jail. So, and they know obviously where they're at. If he leaves the place where he's not supposed to be and is going back to his house, the safety's, it doesn't matter whether he's walking or in a car. They know exactly where they are, so they know exactly where to pick him up or pull him over. Thank you, sir.
Bill, you Garcia.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question that I had, I'll be honest, I started doing criminal appointments here in the last month. And so with respect to bail and pretrial detention, one question I would have is when does home confinement present itself as an option? Because there's a number of times where the attorneys might argue in front of the magistrate. I guess I'm looking more at misdemeanor cases, but about what the bill is going to be. There's argument, and maybe the bill is set, and then the defendant can't make the bill. Sometimes there's follow-up hearings, motions to modify bail. So when do you all find that home confinement is used in that context?
Well, it comes up a lot of times at felony preliminary hearings. So if you have somebody who's arrested on a felony, they're entitled to a preliminary hearing within 10 days in front of a magistrate. They go down. A lot of times we'll talk to the attorney, have them, preliminarily evaluated. And they would waive their preliminary hearing for maybe a bond reduction or an OR bond with a special term of home confinement. Now, they don't get on home confinement until they're approved. I mean, home confinement, as prosecutor, I can't just say I put them on home confinement. I can agree to it, but that only starts the process where the home confinement office goes out. They have to do a home check, and they have to make sure they don't have some violent past. I mean, they have to be protected. We don't want home confinement officers, although they're trained, going out to home visits for some violent offender who has violent history. So it comes up at felony preliminary hearings. It comes up on motions in circuit court after they've waived or after they've been indicted and they're still in jail. As far as misdemeanor cases, it can come up at their first hearing in front of the magistrate. Sometimes they will plead to the misdemeanor or a misdemeanor for which they were charged, and instead of being incarcerated, it seems better to put them on home confinement.
How long does the process to check someone's background, check to see what their home is like? How is that going to take?
I've had it done as quickly as 3 hours. So it's very, a lot of times we've already, my office, a lot of times when we go to a preliminary hearing, even 10 days after the arrest, we've already ran what they call a triple I. So we already know what their criminal history is. So it may be as easy as going out and just checking the home to see that it qualifies. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
Ken
me.
teaches the ways, Ken, but
Yes, absolutely.
do you set the rates of $10 and $5 to set something?
No, I have nothing to do with setting the rates. It's, that's what home confinement deems is necessary to
But it's set
their-
local.
make their program self-supported, and a lot of times to get the $5, the indigent rate, that's up to a judge typically to allow that to happen.
You say they typically are able to come up with the money.
They do. I mean, like I say, I know they get family members to help pay, because when it's time for them to get off home confinement, they need to be paid up. And they don't want to wear that bracelet longer than they have to.
Do you get any help from the state subsidize you all?
No, I mean, we get help from the Capital County Commission pays for home confinement for drug court inmates.
Do you get any help from the state?
No, I'm not aware of any help that we get from the state.
Is there anything we can do to make it easier?
Well, money's always the answer.
That's what I hear.
So we have, you know, I was talking to the sheriff a couple days ago or yesterday. You know, our home confinement office is, you know, I don't want to say limitless, but it could be bigger. I mean, and a lot of people, you know, aren't on home confinement like because they can't pay. They have to pay something. The judge can put them on, can delay their fees for like 60 days and say they pay nothing. Give them time to find a job so they have the ability to pay.
It would seem to me that there would be those few maybe that never come up with any amount of money for anything.
I thought that. I would say, how do these people, you know, some of these people that are on home confinement, how in the world do they pay? But they do. They find a way to pay. When you look at, and I was looking at the numbers of all the people, I have a list here of all the 130 some people that are on home confinement. I have their charges, and if they're employed, a lot of them are unemployed. A lot of them are unemployed, but they are not. You know, they're still somehow family, friends. They pay the fees for the most part.
You're going to save Cabell County somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.4 million this year.
Yes, absolutely. And also, when you look at the people on day report that otherwise would be incarcerated, there are 45 clients right now, and in a month with 30 days, they're going to save the county a little over $65,000 in addition to the home confinement savings. So in Cabell County, it seems to me that we save a lot of money using these two alternative programs. And I do believe that we use these programs probably more than most other counties.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Sean, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further business to come before the committee? If not, entertain a motion from the co-chair.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.